Awesome. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anna. I am the Strategic Awareness and Advocacy Lead here at Progress ShareFile, and I will be hosting or emceeing today's webinar. First up, we have Lisa Mundrake. She is the Senior Director of Commercial Legal Services at Progress ShareFile. And Lisa has over 25 years of experience, corporate legal experience. And she is also very experienced with cloud and SaaS and technology companies. And we've invited her today to talk to us about the legal strategy and tech strategy from the point of view of the people who are actually using it, the lawyers who are doing all of the legal work. So thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa. Super pumped to have you here. And then we also have Zach White, who is the Legal Operations Director for Progress Software. Quick caveat about Zach, he's currently experiencing really bad inclement weather, so his screen is off, but he is still with us. And we are pumped to have him because he will be helping or sharing with us the point of view of somebody who is in charge of driving continuous improvement across legal processes, making key decisions on the systems and the strategic initiatives. But Zach, in his role, manages lots of key projects like M&A diligence and integration. And so I'm very excited to have both of them here with us today. So just some pre-text information of why we are talking about aligning your legal tech strategy and your legal business growth strategy is that these are two really important and very different strategies that really need to work together to support each other. You know, we need technology to be efficient. And so it's really important that these two align. Some of the benefits of when they blend seamlessly is better efficiency, better cost savings, better client experiences, more sustainable growth. And when they don't align, kind of the opposite of all of those things happen. And so I have asked Lisa and Zach to join us. Again, just Lisa, I've asked her to give that point of view of the legal folks that are using the technology. And I've asked Zach to join us because he can share the point of view of being the decision maker of evaluating that technology that people like Lisa will ultimately end up using. Lisa and Zach, one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is adoption. So it's not a secret, and it's common in many industries that sometimes there's a disconnect between the technology that is purchased and then adoption amongst end users. There are lots of reasons why that gap can exist. It can exist because of just resistance to change, human behavior. Maybe there wasn't or isn't great training or tool resources available, or maybe there are just so many different tools, it's hard to be an expert in any one of them. And so what I'm really interested from hearing from you guys is, how do we avoid this at law firms? How do we avoid this worst case scenario of buying technology, especially for small to medium sized law firms? Budget is really, really critical. So what strategies do you guys use to ensure successful adoption?
Yeah, no, thank you, Anna. And apologies again about the no camera. If anyone's in the Central Texas area, you probably heard the thunder that took out my power. But anyways, I think you hit on something really key here right out of the gate, which is that organizations can adopt technology, but if the users don't adopt it within the organization, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to succeed. So, some of the things that I look for as we're looking to onboard new technologies, I'm really looking at what my users are going to be, what the user experience is going to be. And particularly, working with lawyers and legal professionals, it's going to need to be very intuitive, straightforward, not a whole lot of, complicated, back-end processes that you need to build out ahead of time. It needs to be out of the box, ready to go. And part of my job is to help make that happen. One of the things that really helps in that area is working with an integrated tech stack. This keeps really all your workflows in context, provides additional visibility for everything that you're doing. If multiple technologies are working together, you can eliminate data silos, amplify your data sharing. It really helps to improve a collaborative environment, even outside of the legal department. If you're working with finance on billing tools, or engineering on ticketing tools, it doesn't matter what it is. The more integrated the environment, the more user adoption you're going to see.
Yeah, so I would echo then from the legal professional using the tool, there has to be simplicity of use. Lawyers are very slow to change the ways of working. We get used to something, we want to continue to work that way. It's going to need to be a change that really has benefits right out of the gate. It's going to save us time. It's going to be easy to use. It's going to lead to greater efficiency, better ways of working. Those are the types of things that we're going to be more inclined to adopt and to use more quickly. Otherwise, we'll just sort of revert to our old ways of working because that's what we know. So again, ease of use, efficiency, real benefits right out of the gate.
What would you guys consider, like, what's the standard for ease of use? Is it just that you can find your way around, or, is it a robust library of support articles? Everyone's user or technical experience can vary so much. So just interested in drilling down a little bit more specifically, something that I think is easy to use is very different for, let's say, somebody like my mom. She finds other technology different. It's not an age thing. It's just we just use different technology. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
It really does depend on the user, because familiarity is really key here. If you're used to working in a particular suite of tools, onboarding another tool that uses a similar button configuration, the ribbons like in Microsoft and all that, if the user experience is similar, that's really going to help folks adopt much better. And this is made even easier if you're kind of building out with a single vendor. A lot of times there is alignment in the user experience, from a single vendor. And that even helps with what I was talking about earlier with an integrated tech stack as well. So, this is really helping with adoption and continuing to grow on existing technologies.
That's interesting. I never thought about integrations playing a role or impacting ease of use, but if you know how to use the tools that it integrates with, well, then you are, a little bit of the way there to understanding how to use the tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
Lisa,
I think
did you want to share some?
Yeah, I certainly struggle with, in the environment that I'm in currently, multiple tools. There's all kinds of tools that you could use. Some are overlapping in terms of the functionality that they offer. Others are, it's a matter of where the client does their work. So you want to meet the client where they are. So certainly something to Zach's point of an integrated tech stack, where you are not looking for, I need to log into this tool to find this particular piece of information, or I need to search in this environment to find this other piece of information. That really adds to the complexity of the job daily. And so something that's rolled out, that's integrated, that doesn't require jumping from one tool to another, that allows you to meet the client where they are, ideally, those are best case scenarios for efficiency.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Lisa. And I think what you're hitting at is like one tool to many solutions, like making sure that a tool doesn't just have a single use case, making sure that it has, if as much as possible, finding tools that bring together different applications or features inside of it that can solve just more than one problem. That way you don't have one tool for e-signature, one tool for document sharing, and all that app switching. That's a really interesting thought.
And if the integration is seamless, to your point on integration, for me as the user, if the integration is seamless and it's happening without me needing to do anything special other than just my daily work, that is going to make it even better, right? So if there are multiple ways you can get the task done through the integration, you don't even realize that's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Then that's a real benefit.
Yeah, that's a great point. Moving right along to the next thing I wanted to ask you guys about is maximizing and measuring your tools. Something that I think is interesting is I recently attended the ABA Tech Show, and was talking with a speaker after one of her sessions that was all about measuring the ROI of your tools. And one of her tips was to constantly always subscribe to whatever tools you're using, subscribe to their updates email, because that way you can always learn what new features are coming out. That I thought that was so simple, but also so genius in that just because you purchase a tool today doesn't mean that it's not going to grow and its capabilities aren't going to expand. So I wanted to hear from you guys on maximizing, measuring tool usage. How do you make sure, one, that everyone's taking full advantage of a tool's features at the onset when you are first rolling it out, but then over time, how do you make sure people are still benefiting from new features that are being added? Zach, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. One thing that can be helpful is kind of setting out KPIs in advance of adoption, what the key performance indicators are of a successful adoption. And with that information, then you can, once users are starting to onboard, starting to use the tool, then you can measure against that. I mean, this is kind of, old practice in the scientific method. You need to, come up with your parameters first before you start jumping into the results. And this really can keep you honest with what success actually looks like. Instead of adopting a tool that ends up being a time suck or isn't being utilized in the way that it needs to be, and then it's it can be inefficient use of both time and money there. But a lot of tools these days, you're able to leverage real-time data reporting, and so that can really help you to measure the usage and demonstrate the successes of the tool, and it justifies the investment there.
Yeah, I think you can also automate those reports too now so that you don't have to manually pull them. Just curious, what are some of those KPIs that you might look for in a tool? Is it, I'm sure it's just utilization, but are there any other big ones that come to mind that we should all be thinking about?
Yeah, utilization is good, and it's really it's what that utilization is doing. What is it replacing? So if you're looking to reduce time spent on a certain task, then you're going to want to see your attorneys that are using the tool spending less time on those specific tasks so that they have more time elsewhere.
That's fascinating. So it's looking not just at the tools, but then what the tool is helping you replace, tracking those metrics as well. Fascinating.
Right.
Lisa, would love to hear your take.
So I'm just thinking about how do we keep up from my perspective. Certainly having the benefit of someone like a legal operations person or an administrator who can keep us educated on the tool. So regular training, onboarding, continuous communication, around the tool, the improvements, enhancements, additional features is certainly key, because we're not necessarily going to explore it on our own. We're going to need people like Zach to give us the incentive and the motivation and make it easy for us to understand, what's available and when. I also think a big part for me personally is networking and benchmarking and being a part of communities or subscriptions where you have the opportunity to hear what other people are doing in the space, what's working for them and why, where it is being used more broadly in these communities, groups, legal groups like I think I gave this example before in other conversations, IAPP. There's a very robust community there around tools and technology and why certain things work and why others don't. So if you find those different groups that you favor as an attorney, you're a member of, and you value, that's a really good way to stay up to date, as well as just simply talking to your peers. Again, what are they doing and what do they find success with?
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. I forgot, other people might have questions just like I do that all the time. Other people have questions that are very similar to mine, using a certain tool, and there are definitely those like community boards that you can join and look at to see what's being posted. Great thought there.
And I can actually piggyback on that just a little bit,
Yeah,
because
please.
I think that's a great point, Lisa, that, I know a lot of attorneys that, subscribe to a lot of, law firm, regular distributions. And you mentioned privacy professionals. Those are great resources for staying up to date in those practice areas. And, I previously was a privacy professional, and so that I lived a little bit of that life. And now that I'm on the tech side, I have a very different digest of emails coming in. And so now what I'm looking for is, things, so I'm on a lot of the distributions from the vendors, and I'm looking for little pieces of information that I can pull out and share with the rest of the team. Here at Progress, we have a legal intranet where we make resources available and share things with each other there. And so that's where I can pull out, maybe it's a document or a video, or maybe something that I see inspires me to make a document or video myself. I really like creating cheat sheets where I just kind of condense information down into like a single page resource that I can share with the other folks. And a lot of that content is from these regular distributions.
Wow, thank you for that. And it made me think of something that I do is, it's a little unorthodox, but if I discover something cool in like Microsoft Teams or some kind of shortcut, like when I have like one-on-one syncs with people, I'll be like, hey, I discovered how to do this thing. Do you want me to show you? And they're like, yeah, show me. So just even helping each other out. I thought of that because of what Lisa had said, and Zach, hearing you talk about being on two different sides of a coin of, this really, staying up to date is a team effort. One person, you really can't do it all. And so whether it's relying on your internal network of coworkers or an external network of people in your profession, info sharing is a really powerful way to make sure you're maximizing your tool's potential. This is really pretty similar or nicely relates to the next topic that I wanted to ask you about, which is not so much just maybe like the tool that you've already purchased, if you love it, staying up to date with it, but other tools, and not even just tools, but we can also talk about other technologies. So I know everyone loves to talk about maybe AI, but I know automation is starting to really become more and more developed. Like at ShareFile, for instance, we're rolling out lots of automated workflows. I know that I pulled this interesting statistic of 92% of law firm executives, they see greater adoption of technology, making it a key strategy for improving firm performance. So my question to you guys is, how do you stay ahead, or at least stay on pace? It might be hard to be staying ahead of what's coming around the curb, but how are you making sure that you aren't behind in terms of technology? What factors might you use if, let's say, a new and emerging like AI or automation or something like that? If you're hearing a lot of chatter about it, what are some factors that guide your decision to say, yeah, I think we should really, this isn't just a trend, this is something that's going to really shape and change how we work in the legal profession. So I guess in short, how do you evaluate what's coming out? And then, how do you decide how much weight to give that new technology? Lisa, I'd love to hear your perspective.
So for me, I think I have an advantage in that I work in technology.
Sure.
So being in the field, being in this industry for a long time, it's about mindset for me personally and for my team. So having a mindset where you're open to embracing change, where you understand that technology is here to stay and it's a part of what's available to us to make our lives easier, as well as to meet the business need better. So I think it's really, again, I'm fortunate in that I have developed over time a cloud mindset, working in the cloud, working in SaaS, being around like-minded people who are also embracing change and looking for ways to streamline, looking for opportunities to automate. I am a big fan of getting rid of sort of the lower value work that attorneys can do through automation, can avoid doing through using automation. Let's use a simple example like an NDA workflow, to have an NDA populated, signed without anybody ever necessarily having to touch it. So finding ways to sort of push that lower value work out to tools, to automation, to workflows is something myself and my team have been doing for a while, and we'll continue to look for ways to do that so we can really focus on the more strategic and high value work, which brings the most satisfaction from where I sit, right, for the job.
Something interesting that you said that I'd love to dive a little deeper in is you said, I'm really fortunate that I have been, I think I'm paraphrasing, but being in tech, I'm excited and I'm always looking for new technology. I think what I've heard from talking with different people in the legal industry is that there are some people who might be a little bit change averse because just naturally human nature change is really, really hard. I can't remember. I saw a statistic the other day. It was something like uncertainty is really challenging for the brain because it has to problem solve like solution A and solution B. I guess I'm just interested in hearing, Lisa, like the emotional, like, what do you tell yourself when you're like AI? It's really new and also kind of frustrating because it's so new for all of us. So what are you telling yourself when you're in the midst of the pain of change that, is there an example or something in your past that you say, well, I did this in the past and it really did benefit me, so I'm just going to stick through it? I don't know. I just think it's important to acknowledge that the change is hard. And what do you tell yourself when you're feeling the pangs and pains and anxiety of that change?
Most importantly, stay calm.
Yeah.
Right? Stay calm. Don't panic. You will figure this out, even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable. I have said to my team over the years, and myself, my own sort of mantra is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I think that's really important, especially when you're talking about things like AI. Yes, it's uncomfortable. We haven't figured it out from a lot of different perspectives, but it's here, and there are value adds to using it that we can see immediately. We don't necessarily know what the long term holds or what other opportunities are coming. But now's the time to put aside being uncomfortable, embrace the change, find ways to incorporate it into your daily routine to the extent you are comfortable, and just follow certain parameters or guidelines to protect yourself and your usage, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit more as we go further into this webinar. But my overall approach is being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's my mantra too. And it's not always easy. But I think one thing I liked of you saying is you have a team underneath you, and I'm a part of a team, and just being on the same side, like we're all in this together, being encouraged by leadership to test, explore, make mistakes, there are policies in place that will help protect you. And my boss is always there for questions. So I think that's really great. Zach, I'd love to hear your point of view.
Yeah, Lisa mentioned some specific needs, and that's usually where I like to start, is looking internally at what problem you're actually solving first, and then going to see what the best solution is. I really don't like to just follow the latest shiny object, because that's a great way to adopt the wrong thing. It might be a great tool, but a bad fit. So if you really concentrate on what your most pressing problems are that you need to solve, then you can start your research as to what is the best tool that you can use to solve that problem. And there's going to be a lot of them, both problems and solutions. And so one of the ways that I like to kind of try to navigate this problem is creating a matrix of need versus complexity. And this gets back to what Lisa mentioned about ROI. As the need increases, your return is going to increase. As the complexity increases, your investment's going to increase. So if you need to show some wins right up front, you're going to want to find some of those use cases that are low complexity, high need, And you can knock those ones out first, get some goodwill in the process, and move on to the next one, and until you've tackled all those significant issues, and then you end up with everyone having copious free time, which we're all striving for.
Wow, a couple of things you said that I really liked, but the last thing I think is a really interesting and important takeaway of find those key use cases first. And I think you said so that you can build up some goodwill with the tool, and start getting some immediate gains. I think that's a great point. Did I paraphrase that correctly?
You did, yeah, and I can speak a little specific to AI too, because I know that this is on everyone's mind, and we touched on that here. But when you're doing this evaluation, I think of AI as a feature, not a solution itself. And so AI is going to be a part of so many of our solutions going forward, but it is not itself going to solve our problems. So really the new technologies, they're not going to replace people so much as they are going to change what people do, at least in the short term here, in the immediate term. But in working with AI tools with AI, those people who come to understand their human value in that human technology relationship, those are the ones that are going to thrive and go on to be able to adopt more and more tools and become more and more productive. And I think that's really how our organization is looking at this, and I think it's the right way, which is it's not a headcount replacement, it's a headcount amplifier.
Sure. Yeah. That's a really great point, as was the point. It reminds me of the point you led with, is that I don't lead with the shiny new object first. I lead with the use case and the need and the people first, because the tool itself isn't the solution. It's a tool to help people be more productive, do more things, save more time. I'm really glad that you mentioned that. How do you connect with folks to make sure that you're looking at technology that is fitting their needs? Do you meet regularly with legal teams? Are there working groups that you guys have? How does that work?
One of our, I think, success stories right now is our early adopters group.
And
something I was going to come back to the concept of team that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
There are some folks on these teams and law firms and other businesses that are more willing and interested in playing around with the technology, in finding those automation or ways to help with and there are others who are not. And so what we have done recently with Zach's direction is put together an AI early adopters group, which is a subset of a larger team within the legal department, those that are anxious, eager, interested in putting themselves out there, learning faster, and then giving feedback, right? And saying this does meet this use case, or I can see this other situation or scenario where this would be valuable. And we're bringing together sort of our individual experiences as well as those that are curated by Zach or others, to test, to try, to get that feedback collected, and then take those learnings and use them, apply them to our broader use cases within the team, and then roll them out as either a must do, because this is really going to benefit all of us, or a can do if you'd like to use this. So we're in the early stages of it. I don't want to say that we solve for all of it, but it certainly has been from my perspective, a real opportunity to get in there, test, share, give feedback, and then lead the way, which is something that I really enjoy. Lead the way to what we may want to do next.
That is a great, I'm glad you shared that example of this group and just this existing feedback loop that, you have with Zach's team. Zach, I wanted to ask one more question on this topic to you. Is when we had first started chatting, one of the considerations we had mentioned was budget. Sometimes you just have a budget and it is what it is. But what do you do, or how do you handle situations, or have you been in a situation where your budget might limit you from testing a new tool or a new type of technology. Has that happened, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, so that's a great point because early on, I started to realize that budget was very a back end part of the discussion. And I encountered probably, too many vendor discussions that got to the point of budget, and then that killed it.
Right.
And in the meantime, that's a lot of, wasted, time and resources in demoing and then, I mean, if you're going through the adoption process, efficiently, you're going to want to have executive buy-in. You're preparing for training, and you don't want to go through all these kind of steps and then realize that it's not even something that you can onboard.
Right.
So I really try to front load that budget discussion as much as possible. So that and I mean it works on both sides. That if the relationship isn't going to work anyway, why burn a bunch of time on it? So if you have an understanding of what your budget is, and this is a process, it's always a scarce resource, and so budget is going to be allocated based on need. And so if you have a bigger need, but maybe it has a more impressive ROI, maybe you do want to allocate more of your budget towards that single solution that you're getting a lot of ROI on, rather than a few other solutions with the lower ROI. And so this is really an organization by organization consideration, but it's something that I highly recommend front loading.
Oh, wow, that's great. This stat will not be a surprise to folks, but more than 3/4 of legal professionals anticipate a high or transformative impact from AI over the next 5 years. But I think we've alluded to this earlier too, is that AI is super exciting and the things that it can do for us, but it's also really anxiety producing because there are a lot of questions about, is this secure? Is this compliant? Can I trust this? Can I, check, trust the outputs? And so I wanted to pose a question to you both, Lisa and Zach. Zach, we can kind of talk or pitch the question to you first of, with AI taking center stage, how do you make sure you're adopting it safely? Because I'm sure that AI is starting to be embedded into tools that you're already using or tools that you're considering. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if your team is building its own AI system. I know at ShareFile, for instance, we are building it into ShareFile so that our users can access it through ShareFile. They don't have to build their own AI system. But so how do you make sure you're safely adopting it and using it, especially in the legal industry? What concerns or best practices can you maybe share with the group that guides your use of AI in various tools?
Yeah, no, AI is being built into everything now. And so, as everyone knows, AI does work on large bodies of data across various sources. And so one of the risks that you rightly point to is around privacy and confidentiality, which is one of the things that we take into consideration where we try to adopt tools with AI that we can stand up behind our firewall, so that they are really learning from our data set and not being shared outside of our organization. This is something that a lot of tools are increasingly coming to accommodate, but a lot of technologies, privacy has been increasing in really focus and complexity, for quite a while, since GDPR, and then CCPA comes along. We've got the EU AI Act coming up. But really, technology can really help you in all these compliance efforts, plus internal compliance, by supporting this, secure data storage and data transfer.
Awesome. Lisa, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think some of the key things that we're looking for in using AI in the form of governance, there's really two things. One is having governance, meaning this is the way to use it. So Zach's example of a safe environment, so something behind the firewall where you have access to the tools, it has a limited data set it's training on, it's protected in terms of your privacy. That's absolutely a big part of governance from where we sit, and one of the most important things. And then in addition to that, making sure that you are protecting your use in that the models that you're using, if you're doing something outside of a protected environment, are not taking your data to train it. There's disclaimers included where that AI is not the end all. Whatever the outcome is, it still needs your review. You still, certainly from a legal perspective, you cannot rely on the tool that you're using to give the advice that would replace your advice. It's going to help you to get to the result quicker in a lot of cases, but it's not going to be something that you can rely upon as the end all be all. So you need to be comfortable with taking the output, making sure that it references materials that are valid, accurate, complete, before you go and incorporate it into your daily use case, whatever that might be. So governance, and then protecting the data, understanding how the data is being used, and making sure that you have that human oversight and review are some of the key tenements that we are implementing within our team.
Okay, awesome. You know, guys, is there anything I haven't asked today that is important in aligning your tech strategy with your legal strategy? Yeah, if there's something I haven't asked that you think is important to talk about or reference, just kind of wanted to open it up before we move to Q&As.
I think we touched on everything that I wanted to, and I think I would just remind people that you know, when you're adopting the new technologies and you really want them to succeed, they need continuous attention. You can't just stand it up and ignore it. Really, you can be, you know, continuously publishing resources on an internal share site, a continuous outreach to the users, making sure that they're aware of new features. Are they experiencing any pain points? Looking at your data reporting dashboards or just periodic reports. And it's really just you know, an overall health check of your technology stack.
Yeah, that's a great point. And is it okay if you're like, you know what, we tried this tool and no, the health check isn't good. You know, how do you handle that? Or, you know, because emotionally if we you know, say, hey, this is where I think we should invest the money, you know, and it doesn't work out. I know here at Progress, and a lot of companies that are more progressive, I don't want to use the term fail first, but it's like you have to try. And if you don't try, you'll never know. I don't know, Zach, have you had an experience where like we tried and it just didn't work, but let's just keep rolling?
Certainly, yeah. And very often, I think the solution in that case is finding a different process or tool that fits that same need, because it was onboarded for a reason. It was, you know, it was adopted for a reason. That means there was a pain point, there was a need, and just ripping it out and not replacing it with anything probably isn't going to work. So if you are finding a tool that isn't being used enough, maybe it's a cumbersome tool that people are complaining about a lot, your reporting isn't looking good, look around for you know, existing tools that you have that you can expand your use case of, or other tools that can perhaps solve that problem better.
Great point of, you know, don't just remove and replace, but consider process, consider the initial problem that you're trying to solve. I think those were great points. I'm just curious, like I asked a worst case scenario for Zach. I'd like to end on a positive, best case scenario. You know, can you think of an instance in your past where a tool worked really well, kind of all the things that we mentioned were followed, and, you know, what was the result of that?
I can think of several examples actually of, again, coming back to the concept of embracing change, right, and being willing to try different things. We have been through a lot of change in technology over the last year, and being open to the different tools and finding, surprisingly, that this one or that one works for this particular use case and maybe better than you thought, and maybe you were nervous or afraid of using the particular tool. I have had several of those, and honestly, it comes down to, again, for me personally and my team, the ability to automate, to work with workflows, to simplify tasks that don't need a lot of time, even make them even more simple through these additional tools. And then I think the last big piece of advice that I have, just thinking about what Zach closed on, is meeting your client where they are. I'm not a huge fan of using a zillion different tools, as I mentioned earlier, but in reality, you really do need to understand how your client is working. And if they're working in Slack, or they're working in Jira, or they're working in ShareFile, whatever the tool is, you have to, as the lawyer and the legal professional, be willing to understand what that tool is, how it works, how it benefits them, and what they're doing to accomplish, their goals, and be willing to find ways to work with that tool also, because it's only going to be easier in the long run if you were willing to embrace that, open yourself up to it, understand it, and then use it so that you can meet them where they're working.
Totally. That's a really positive and great message to end today's webinar on. And I want to thank Zach and Lisa. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Really appreciate it.